So I was really excited about reading Stephen A. McKay's book about King Alfred. Not just because I'm a big fan of Alfred the Great, but because I was really interested because Stephen was a very successful independent author like me. Well, he's an independent author like me. Probably a lot more successful than I've been so far. But Stephen is someone who has found success as a independent author, and then finally a publisher came along and said, "We like your stuff, and we would like you to write a series for us." So this is my review of the first book of that series. And yes, I've had a few drinks because I'm taking care of my father who is in hospice, the Baron von Engdahl. And this is going to be a short one because after dinner, he likes to settle in and watch the news and have finish his wine. And then he likes to have what he calls the third shift, which will be when we break into the Sambuca. And I put him out some eclairs and some espresso to go that he can finish up with. So anyway, who am I? My name is Cody Siengdahl. I'm an author. I am the author of 5 novels right now that you can find on Amazon and 2 nonfiction works. I'm currently writing my 6th novel, which is the French Fiasco. But that's not important right now. What we're going to talk about tonight is Stephen A. McKay's, sorry, Stephen, if you're saying this, book, The Heathen Horde. And like I said, I was really interested in this because, first of all, I like Anglo-Saxon England, that what they call the sub-Roman era, the pre-Norman invasion. I like Stephen a lot. I consider him a friend. I know him through social media. I am a big fan of the show that he does with Matthew Harvey, and which is called Rock, Paper, Swords, which if you're interested in historical fiction and kind of like shop talk and the industry as a whole when it comes to writing and marketing historical fiction novels, it's a great podcast. I was on it. Check it out. I was very excited when they invited me, but I was going to do this anyway. In fact, I'm a little late because when I first found out that he got a contract with a major publisher, I wanted to read the book right away, and I was just kind of a cheapskate because it was like $5.99. I'm like, I don't know. I'm still kind of a starving artist right now, but it got on sale, and they dropped down to $1.99. I don't know what it is right now. I think I've seen it as low as 99 cents. Canelo, which is his publisher, they run short sales like I do. It's that try to bring people in. And I would suppose, I don't know where it is right now. Of course, the prices are different in the US and the UK, but and elsewhere in the world. But I would suppose that they would want people to get in on book 1 because here's a major headline here, breaking news. Tomorrow, book 2 on the 4th of July is coming out. The book 2 is called the Sword of the Saxons. And so anyway, my understanding is the story behind this is that Stephen, who had done a very well writing a Robin Hood series and a series based off of his own character called Bellicose, which is a druid warrior, sub-Roman. And you'll have to excuse me because not only am I drunk, but my lymph nodes are blowing up. My tongue is swelling because all the damn pollen in the air after a storm here in Florida. And I think I heard him say in one of the podcasts that he had done a review and for one of Canelo's authors, and they liked him, and they contacted him and said, "Would you be interested in doing something for us?" And he said yes. And my understanding, I mean, this is from reading his historical note, is that he said to them, "What would you like?" And they said, "Well, what do you think about Alfred the Great?" And I think he said something along the lines of, "Yeah, I guess I guess he's great. Sorry. And so he did the research and wrote. I think the whole trilogy is done. Uh, Stephen, I know that when he gets a task, that he goes right at it and gets it done. I think I remember him saying, "I know the second book's coming out tomorrow." Yeah, I think he's written the whole series, the whole trilogy. So and I think it's very interesting as well, is because he says the first time that he's written a series or a trilogy that is, his other work, Robin Hood is not a real character, or if he is, he's loosely based off of, he's mostly a mystical, legendary character. And that's why there's several people who write Robin Hood books. And nobody owns the character, so everybody can do it. And he's got his own character, Bellicose, but mostly they're people who are painted onto the canvas of history so that you're not so deeply tied to like events. But this was, I think, probably a great experience. It's something I haven't done. I've done a lot of historical characters that are in my books, and their storylines, always I make sure follow the real history so that I'm not writing something that isn't true. But when you make the character, the historical person, the main character, well, there's a lot of confines there. And Stephen, I read the historical note, and he said he made a few tiny adjustments so that the story flowed well. And I read that. I read the book. I read his historical note. I said, yeah, this is all acceptable. You know, it's one thing to do that. It's another thing to like completely change the truth. So if I know him like I know him, I feel like everything I read in there is pretty close to the truth, but just dramatized into a novel as opposed to like a nonfiction work. So I feel like when you read this, um, you're getting a good sense of King Alfred. I also feel like the danger of doing things like Robin Hood or um, King Arthur or Alfred the Great is that we've had a lot of versions of them, and so our minds are kind of tainted. So you have to not only just write a great story and it's a compelling story, but you have to convince the reader or the viewer, if it's a movie, that this is the legit version. I mean, how many versions of there are there of like King Arthur, for example? And we've seen a lot of versions of Alfred the Great now in the Bernard Cornwell series, which is called the Saxon series in the books. It's called the Lost Kingdom series in the TV show. Um, they had a lot of people know Alfred, including myself, because of that. Because I read all the books. I stopped watching the series because I didn't like the series. I thought it was too far from the books. But the one glowing thing about the series that I did like was the actor who played Alfred. I just felt like that actor, can't remember his name, but that actor who played Alfred was so good. He made the series work for me. And then when he died off, I was like no longer interested because I didn't like the guy who was playing Uhtred. Sorry, ladies, I know he's handsome. And I just felt like it was so far from my understanding of that series in the books and I think for the most part, I'm usually disappointed in series in the film version of things. Very rarely have I seen a movie where like, yeah, this is exactly how the book is. Um, but I think one of the interesting things that Stephen has said going into because I heard him talking about it because I listened to his podcast a lot, is that even in Bernard Cornwell's version, there is an idea that Alfred, maybe as a young man, was into women and drinking, but we mostly think of him as kind of like a monkish, very pious, very Christian uh, king who probably would have been better off being a monk or a priest than a king. Um, but that doesn't really jive with history because someone like that wouldn't have been able to accomplish the things that Alfred was able to accomplish. And so Stephen said no. He says a lot of that's true. We know that he was sick. Um, uh, we modern scholars think that he had Crohn's disease. I dated a girl who had Crohn's disease, and so I understand it a little bit. There's very limited of what you can eat or drink that's not going to cause you to have terrible stomach pain, and so they think that's that. The other thing about Alfred being like a super monk priest like king is that we mostly know about him because there was a priest named Asser who was Welsh um, who Alfred commissioned to be kind of his chronicler. And so most of what we know about Alfred, it comes from this priest or this monk who is a propagandist, and in a time where like your faith and your Christianity is super important. And so I think that the historical record is absolutely biased, because what Asser wants to do is make you think that he's a super religious, super devout Christian king, which I'm not saying he didn't have those things. But we also know that when he was young, that he liked servant girls and he liked to drink, and he was kind of a party boy. He was the youngest of, I think, three or four brothers, I think. And I think when his father died, each one of them became king. And Alfred was never supposed to be king. And the only reason why he was king was because his brother, the last king before him, his two sons were like 4 and 2, and they had the Vikings, the Norsemen, the Danes were invading England. It was a time of absolute crisis, and so you couldn't just trust the kingdom to a child and a regent. You had to have someone who was in the game. And so Alfred got his brother to convince his brother in the Witan. The Witan is kind of like the council. They voted to make him the heir in case his brother died, and his brother did die, and Alfred became king. And if you know anything about Alfred, he's kind of considered the first king. He's the king of the Anglo-Saxons, because up until that point, and afterwards too, that what we know is England was a combination of kingdoms of Wessex and Sussex and um, uh, East Anglia and Northumbria, and I'm sure there's some I'm forgetting, and eventually all of that will become England, and then all of that will conquer Wales and conquer Scotland and Ireland for a long period of time and become the United Kingdom that we know today. So anyway, let's get to the review. So I'm very happy because I I like Stephen and his partner in the podcast, Matthew Harvey, and they both have their books coming out tomorrow, which I think is ironically the 4th of July, which is the day that we Americans celebrate as our independence from Britain. And Scotland would have been part of Britain at that time that we were fighting against. But I think it's a testament to our everlasting fraternity with the British and all the English speaking countries, Canada and Australia and South Africa and Republic of Ireland and India, all these places that we share a common culture that binds us together. When I lived in Japan, my best friends there were British and Australian and Canadian and all that. So both of those guys, I don't know if this was planned or not, but both of them have books out. Matthew Harvey's got a book out called The Dark Frontier. It's his first American Western. And then Stephen A. McKay's book comes out tomorrow called The Sword of the Saxon, which is book 2 of the book we're going to talk about. And they have different publishers, but both of them both of those publishers said that the 4th of July would be a great day for, and I don't know if it has anything to do with the American holiday. And I'm not saying that it is, but I would say that America is the biggest book buying market in the world. And what's really funny is I make a lot of times more money in the UK because I think more people per capita read in the UK and are interested in historical fiction. But the US has such a huge economic market that we make up for that in volume because really we're 50 states and each state is like a country into itself, and so there's enough people in the United States. That's why we do so well like in sports. We have no business winning medals in soccer, but we do because we're an immigrant country, and we're like the best of 50 countries teaming up to play against small nations that have the population of just one of our states. So let's get into this book review. All right, so this is my review here. Okay, the Heathen Horde comes out swinging. This is a fresh and exciting new look at the historical Alfred the Great, one of the Britain's most legendary kings, and perhaps the father of England. Stephen A. McKay fleshes out Alfred from the historical record and legends to give us a hero to cheer for, an authentic person to care about. McKay's Alfred is a flawed man who must overcome his own weaknesses if he's to save his people from the seemingly unstoppable Viking invasion. His character reminds me a lot of Shakespeare's Henry V. Both are legendary for their roguish behavior during their youths, chasing women and drink before taking on the dire responsibilities of kingship during a time of peril. Alfred is equally known for his faith and poor health. Most scholars believe he suffered from Crohn's disease. Stephen. Sorry, Stephen. McKay lays out a convincing path for Alfred that will take him from the wild party boy prince to the pious leader and ferocious warrior. And I'm going to take a break from my review just to point something out there. That's one of the things I heard Stephen talk about was that it's like everybody, talks about how he was into, chasing servant girls and drinking when he was young, and that he was a super pious priest-like, monk-like king and an academic. He liked to collect books. But at that time, kings fought. They fought in shield walls. They were warriors too. There's no way that he would have been able to inspire other men to fight to hold not only Wessex together, but eventually the Heptarchy or whatever England was, all Britain together to fight off the Danish threat. So he was like, I think he balances this out where like, yeah, he was religious, but that don't think and yes, he suffered from a physical ailment, but don't think he wasn't a warrior too. The guy could fight. All right. The book's exciting. The book is exciting from the very beginning. Its ominous prologue portends the storm to come. The sons of Ragnar Lothbrok will have their revenge, and they're bringing the great heathen army with them. Britain will be made to pay. The book picks up with a young, rambunctious Prince Alfred during his brother's reign. Alfred is a mere teenager, just beginning to learn how to fight and lead men in battle as the Viking threat grows in Wessex. We follow him through the battles with the Northmen and his own demons as he grows into a man, marries, and eventually becomes king. The book is well structured, giving us a great darkest hour moment and a resolution in the third act. I'm not sure. I know he breaks up in parts. I don't know if it's in three parts, but it's basically the third act is where that happens. That not only satisfies the plot of the first novel of what will be a trilogy, but also satisfies Alfred's development as a character. And even though there's a satisfying conclusion to the story, do not let your guard down during the denouement, because there's a setup for the next book that will make you want to come back for more. By the way, the badass picture you see on the cover totally happens in the book. It's pretty metal. I think you'll like it. And that's the picture right there. See the Viking ships in the raging sea. Um, I was really excited because I was reading the book and I was like reading the description. I'm like, holy cow, that's the cover, and that's a beautiful cover. I That cover made me want to read this book. That's Whoever is that artist deserves a raise. This is beautiful. The gold letters here uh, in the blue background, the white cap sitting on top of it, the Viking boats. Steve, this is a great. I'll have to say, if I'm going to be critical, I think it's a better cover than this. The Sword of the Saxons. Well, that just looks like a rainy day in England, which I think is most days. I think England is a lot like Michigan, but just not as cold. And of course, this is why I do it, because at the end of all this, when you're done reading both of those, check out my latest novel, The Prussian Prince. So, anyway, yeah, it was a very entertaining novel. I think it's very challenging to do something that is uh, like make. It's one thing to have historical characters walk in and out of your story, because you can keep those characters true to the history and just have convenient moments for them to kind of walk in and out of your book to make it feel authentic and real. And I do that all the time. But it's another thing to make your novel about that person, because real life doesn't necessarily always happen like novels. And so you have to, Stephen had to make a trilogy and had to divide Alfred's life into three, and then make each novel have its own story, its own climax, its own darkest hour, its own resolution. And I think he does a great job of that. And like I said, there's a kind of a darkest hour moment, and then there is a resolution that it's true to history. I mean, even as I read it, because I know a little bit about Alfred's reign and rule and his struggle against the Vikings, and it rang true because I knew about this event, but it fed into, like I said, not just satisfying the plot, but also Alfred's um, storyline, his character development. So Alfred is he's the youngest child, and I can't remember his father's name. I used to know it, but he's the youngest child of four, never meant to be king. There's so many kings that are like this, by the way, and queens as well, of England or Britain, that were never supposed to be king but ended up king, and Alfred's one of them. And so a lot of these princes kind of diddle their life away by drinking and sleeping with, whores and girls and all that kind of stuff. And that's why I say reminding me of Henry V, because I don't know how true it is. I'm just going by Shakespeare, who I know is a propagandist. But it reminded me a lot of Henry V, because if you read or watched Henry IV Part 1 and 2, Prince Harry is a different person than King Henry V, because Prince Harry, who the throne is far off, likes to hang out in taverns and hang with low class people and drink and chase women around. And then when he becomes king, he becomes very serious. And that's kind of the same story as Alfred. And I wonder if Shakespeare was even influenced by the story of Alfred and putting that on Henry V, who is the ancestor of his sovereign and sometime patron Elizabeth I. So anyway, what I'm saying is that I feel like uh, one of the things that McKay did was show us how he starts as a teenager who's more interested in drinking and chasing women, um, and starts having his physical ailment, and thinks that is God's reprimand against him, and also that and I know this is true, that a lot of the Anglos and the Saxons and the Irish and the Scotty and the were the Picts at that time. I don't know. Thought that was the Vikings were God's judgment against them. That God had sent the Vikings because they were not pious enough, and so his Alfred, and I think this rings true, started turning more and more to religion, thinking that if he was right, the pain that he was having from his ailment, Crohn's disease, would level out, and that he would be able to defeat the Vikings. And I think that, and of course in his life he has successes and failures, and we know that eventually he goes from being king of Wessex to, not in this book. I mean, he becomes king of Wessex in this book, but he'll eventually be the king of the Anglo-Saxons, and which is a lot of historians say that he's the first true English king, because before him you had Bretwaldas, and Bretwaldas are like great kings that had influence over other kings in Britain, but they weren't necessarily the kings of England. This and Alfred never truly became that. I think his grandson Althelstan is the first true king of England, but then even he, after him, England got broken up a few times. We had some Danish rulers, because the Vikings don't go away. They go away by the time the Normans come, and the Normans take over and kind of replace the Anglo-Saxons as the ruling class. But eventually they kind of go native, and I think Henry the Fourth is the first. I think the first English king who sensed Norman invasion, who spoke English as his native language. Anyway, I'm gonna break it up there, because I know my father, the Baron von Engdahl, is probably waiting for what he calls third shift, and I am too. I just wanted to get this in because tomorrow is the 4th of July, and I am about 50,000 words into my latest novel, The French Fiasco. I need to edit the last chapter I wrote. I think chapter 16 is coming along swimmingly. Yeah, it's hard to drop everything and go live in Florida with your father, who's basically dying before your eyes. But I treat it a lot like a writer's retreat. I'm getting a lot of work done. My dad's very supportive, and we're having a great time. I mean, he's a funny guy. He's a good guy, and I if you don't know me, I cook, and I cook because my father cooked, and my dad's a great cook too. And so we're enjoying having meals together and drinking together and having a good time. So anyway, love you guys. Go check out the Heathen Horde, especially if you're interested in Alfred and the Vikings and Anglo-Saxons. His second book is out tomorrow, so by the time you see this, it's probably out, which is called The Sword of the Saxons. Matthew Harvey, a friend of both Stephen and mine, he's got an Englishman who loved Westerns and finally had the courage to write one himself. It's a great book. He sent me an advanced copy of it. It's called Dark Frontier. It's also out tomorrow. Another friend of mine, Angus Donald, has been writing a King Arthur book, but he's been releasing it in installments. So like the final installment of book 1, which is episode 5, came out a few days ago. I bought it. I'm going to read it. So that review is coming soon. I also have written I think a blurb for the French Fiasco. So I don't know which is going to come first, but if I finish Donald's episode, I'll do a review of that. That will be one of my live streams, and I'll also probably do one on my blurb, and I got some other ideas. The reason why I'm late is because Laura came down and she spent about 5 days here. It was great, not just for me, but she's a beautiful woman, and I mean inside and out. And just while I'm inside cooking, she's sitting out there drinking with my father and just charming him to death. And I think it meant a lot to him to talk to her, and certainly brightened up this place. Uh, that's why I kind of laid off of doing this, and also I wanted to make sure I finish this. And the reason why I'm doing it now drunk is because it's Wednesday. I don't want to go past Wednesday because I want to get one in every week. So I'm going to try to get one in on Sunday, which I should be back in Nashville just for a week though, and then I'll be coming here because I'm here for the long haul. I'm here to, as I say, my father's waiting at the bus station, and I'm waiting here with him. Anyway, I love you guys. Um, do me a favor, if you're reading and you like the author, make sure you give that author a review. Try to give them as many stars as you're willing. Hopefully, 5 stars. We really need it. That's why I'm doing this. I do it for no other reason. I like Stephen a lot, and I think he's a good writer, and I wanted to help him, and I wanted to get this done by today because tomorrow's book 2 comes out. So I hope you at least check out. You can read the preview, which is usually the first few chapters, and decide for yourself. But anyway, I'll probably see you guys in a few days, maybe this Sunday, and I'll talk to you soon. I love you.